Hello and welcome to this Design Cuts video tutorial, and today we're going to be looking at working with layer comps in Photoshop. We're going to look at what they are and how you can make use of them. The illustration that we're going to be working on is this one, and in it I've used a couple of Design Cuts elements. So let's have a quick look at the elements that I've used. I've used a texture from the Ultimate Texture and Photography Kit. This kit has heaps and heaps of really wonderful textures, and I've used one of those in that illustration. I've also used a bird from this 30 Bird Illustrations kit. This is a vector kit, but there are also some ping files there. So what I did was just open one of the ping files in Photoshop. Here is the bird that I've used, and what I did on a layer below was I just did a rough painting of some white to capture the white behind the bird. I've also added a small shadow beneath the bird's feet. I've got this texture here which is blended in using the linear burn blend mode. There's a white layer underneath that has a screen blend that's just killing a little bit of the color in this multicolored layer here. And this layer has a motion blur on it, which cuts out the sort of sharp edges on the original layer. So this image has been built up with a number of layers. And if I were presenting this to my client, I would have a couple of ways that I wanted to show them this image, a couple of choices at least that I want them to consider. One of them is the image as it is here right now, but then I may want to take out the white background. I might want to say, well, what about the image without that white behind it? Or what if I wanted to use a different blend mode for this texture, or perhaps take out the motion blur here? So there are quite a few ways that I could present this image to my client. But the actual process of presenting the image in different ways can be rather tricky. Well, it can be tricky if you don't use layer comps. So let's see how layer comps are going to help us, and I'm going to choose Window and then Layer Comps. Now I'm using Photoshop CC, but layer comps have been in Photoshop for some time now. They've just been added to in Photoshop CC, but the tools we're going to use have been around for quite a while. It's really just a basic introduction to layer comps. So first of all, I'm going to take the image as it is right now. I'm going to say this is one of the versions that I want to show my client. So I'm going to click here on the new icon, and I'm just going to call this version 1. And I'm going to put down here what is in that version 1. So it's got a white background on the bird. It's got shadows and a motion blur. This is enough of a description to identify this layer comp to me, but you can add some more detail in here should you wish to. I'm just going to click OK. So there's my first layer comp. Now I'm going to set up my document another way, another one of the ways that I would want to present it to my client, perhaps without this white background and perhaps without the motion blur. So now I'm going to set up a second layer comp. I'm going to call this version 2, and I'm going to just call this no white background and no motion blur. Now you can see here that we've got various options that we can select to embed in our layer comp. One of them is the visibility of layers, and that's going to be important to us here because we've made some layers invisible, and we want the layer comp to be storing that invisible layer data here so that the layer comp, when we ask to see what the image looks like, is going to recognize that these layers were hidden, and it's going to hide them for us. Now, position of layer sort of sounds like it might have to do with the position of the layer in the stacking order. Well, it doesn't, so don't be misled by that. I'm going to show you in a minute exactly what position means. Appearance is going to be important in this case too because we turned off this motion blur, and we want Photoshop to take note of that fact, and when we ask to see the image as it was in this version, we want Photoshop to disable that motion blur. So I'll just click OK. And let's make one other layer comp, and for this I'm going to move the bird. So I'm going to take the bird layer, I'm going to start pulling it over to the side here. Now in this case I want the bird with no white fill, but had I wanted the white fill I would have displayed all of these layers, selected all of them, and moved the bird. So let's go and create a layer comp for this. And this is what we mean by the position of the layer. The bird has moved to the right and we want the layer comp to store that moved layer data. So I'll click OK. So far we've created 3 different layer comps. So let's have a look and see what's actually stored in the layer comp and what's going to happen when we click to select it. Well, I can click just here to target the layer comp, but nothing's happened. To be able to view the image as it was when I created it as a layer comp, I would need to click on this box here. And you can see what's happened. This white layer has been displayed, as has the shadow under the bird's feet. When I click here on version 2, the visibility of those layers has been disabled and the motion blur has been turned off. And in version 3, well, it's going to be version 2, but with the layer moved. So this gives me a really handy way of showing different representations of this image to my client. But of course, that would require my client to be sitting beside me or to be sharing a screen, for example, through the internet. But what if my client's not able to see the document as I click on each of these layer comps? Well, Photoshop has a really handy export option. So what you can do is you can choose File and then Export and choose Layer Comps to Files or Layer Comps to PDF. Now, in earlier versions of Photoshop, this option was actually in the scripts area because what you're doing is running a script. So in here would be your layer comps to file or layer comps to PDF option, but it's been moved recently to the export option. I'm going to choose layer comps to files. This is a dialog, so it's asking me where do I want to put my layer comps. So I'm going to click Browse. The image is already going into the folder that I was working in, but I want to add a folder inside this. So I'm just going to call this Client Files. So I'm adding a folder called Client Files into which my layer comps are going to be placed. The file name prefix for each of my layer comps is going to be the file name, which is bird on background, but I could call it whatever I wanted to. Now these are going to be named 00, 001, 002, for example. I can choose to only export the selected layer comps, which is this one here, but if I deselect this option, then all the layer comps are going to be exported to individual files. There's a choice of file formats, BMP, JPEG, TIFF, and you can also export them as PDF or PSD files. I'm going to choose JPEG because that's a flattened file format. And then I can set the quality. So that's the compromise between quality and file size. So dragging it a little bit lower is going to give me a smaller file size, a little bit less quality. When I'm ready, I can just click Run. And as the script ran, you could see that Photoshop selected each of these layer comps. It was as if it clicked on these options here, set up the document the way it looked, and then saved it out, and then went to the next one, and then the next one. And so now each of these layer comps has been exported into a JPEG file. Those 3 JPEG files I could then send to my client and ask them which of those files they wanted to use. So let's just go to that folder. I have it open here. You can see that we've got 3 different layer comps. The file names are bird on background. It's 000. Version 1 is the name of the layer comp. Here's the description. And here's the second one. And here's the third one. So it's very easy for me to send different looks of a single image to my client. And then they can determine which one of these that they want to use. When they tell me which one, it's very easy for me to just open the Photoshop file and select the layer comp that matches the image that they've chosen to use. These layer comps are saved within the file, and of course, if I save everything as a PSD file, then all of these layers, visible or not, are going to be saved in the file. So you can see that layer comps can really help your workflow. You can use them when you're prepping documents for a client, but they're also handy to use yourself if you want to just compare 2 or 3 different versions of a document. I hope that you've enjoyed learning these Photoshop workflow techniques. Let us know what you think in the comments below and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the tutorial. Until next time, I'm Helen Bradley for Design Cuts.